Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Need to Nerd podcast. I'm your host, Spencer, and I am joined by my co-host, a friend who I basically only get to talk to during this at this point, Wes Singleton.
I am bad at lots of things, and one of them is balance.
You know what, dude? Like, I'd rather you be focusing on school and stuff anyway.
Yeah. Or winter breaking. I'm embarrassed how little time I spent with you over winter break.
It's okay. It's all good. I am glad that you got to spend time with your family, like, quite a bit, which was awesome and stuff like that. So I am excited to talk about this week's episode. We were going to do something else, but West did not watch the anime.
I spent the time I could have been watching the anime reading ahead. What can I say?
Wait, really? You're reading the manga?
No, not in My Hero. Reading ahead for school.
Oh, got it. Oh, well, that's good. Now I look bad. Thanks.
Well, and watching Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Okay. But we are actually here. We audibled this week's episode, and we're doing one that a listener actually was really excited for us to do. Shout out to Patty B for being telling me how excited he was for this. Specifically, we are going to be talking about the book Eldest in the Inheritance Cycle. Before we do that...
Spencer, were you going to be here for 2 hours, 3 hours? This is one of your favorite books of all time.
I'm actually hoping to be pretty concise on this one. I have very specific reasons why this is my favorite book.
You thought a long time about
this. Yeah, I really have, actually. But I want to read Entertainment Weekly's Eldest Review, which... it says it was one of the worst 5 books of 2005, calling it a 700-page drag.
It's also that.
It's. We'll get into this in the show, but I knew a lot of people that really were disappointed with Eldest, and had a very different reaction than I did to the book, and it's funny because I think coming off of the conciseness that was things like Harry Potter, for example, for a lot of people, and kind of coming into this more... we talked about it in Aragon, right? Like, when Christopher is describing the egg, or describing, things happening in the book, he tends to write a lot. Yeah. And Eldest... I actually think Eldest suffers the least from this out of all of the books.
But the reason I agree with you, and we'll of course go further, is setting based.
Yeah, I agree. Before we get too far into Eldest, though, I do want to do housekeeping. I just want to give a huge shout out to those who joined this last month's Valheim Night in the Discord. I have begun the series that I tweeted about, where people got to pick my character and pick the seed for me to try to solo beat Valheim this year. I did record the first video, and that should go up whenever the editor gets a chance to take a look at it. But we also got the chance as a group to lose all of our stuff west.
That's
because
sweet.
Isabel had never seen the edge of the world, and the game saved right when we got there.
And everything dropped down.
And one of the people just disappeared out of the boat into the water. And then as I was like, oh no, Luke, no, the boat just moved and then we were gone. And it was really funny because afterwards, how do we get our stuff back? And I was like, you don't get your stuff back.
Yeah.
It's the only way you can't get your stuff back in the game.
Yep. Which, I'll be honest, I think is a design improvement more than it is a detriment.
It was really funny, though.
I don't want to go that far back out to my boat either.
Yeah. Yeah, it was rough losing everything, but we got everything back, every character. Yeah, I think even Luke got upgrades because I felt so bad about losing all of his stuff. So, but shout out to everybody who's been joining in those. I'll continue to do those. Hopefully, West will be able to join the next one. If you want to support the show directly, head on over to patreon.com/HeezyGameMedia. It really, really would help right now. I won't get too personal, but it would mean a lot if you're enjoying this content and would be able to do that. I personally give a lot of my money away to content creators over the last X number of years, and I've actually had to stop doing that just this year. So I won't get too far into it, but if you are enjoying this and you can help in any way, it would mean a lot. So yeah, let's go on to the next thing, shall we?
Absolutely.
I wrote this for you to read, but you are welcome to have me read it if you want.
Ooh, it's your writing, but I'm gonna read it?
Yeah, I'm sure that it's terrible writing too, for what it's worth.
A tragic beginning to a revealing end. The Eldest is the sequel to Christopher Paolini's Aragon, and the second book in what would become the Inheritance Cycle. After defeating the Shade Durza, Aragon is left broken with a terrible wound that has left him scared and fighting painful seizures. But he must push forward and go to the Elven Sanctuary to complete his training, before his battle with the evil king Galbatorix. All while family and friends fight for their lives and their people.
Ooh, shivers.
Yeah?
Yeah, I honestly like this book is I knew I was going to say it on this episode, but I just won't beat around the bush. Like, this book is my empire. Like, I just straight up, I love this book the way that, you know, the generation before me loves Empire Strikes Back.
I inherited that love.
Of which one?
Of Empire.
Oh, I also inherited it, but I'm just saying, like for me, this is that kind of, I don't know, it there's so much to love in this book, and
the world opens up so much.
Oh, it really does. And we
which is funny because it also gets very narrow.
Yeah, it does. Well, we talked about that in the first book, is like how, well, I think it was actually one of your Lovets, right? Is like how precise and stuff this was. But this book is actually what, like, I remember, I wish I had my copy in front of me, but it's actually in the other room. But like, this is the book that got me to go to the back of it, like, read every single word in its translation, look at the map and map things out on, like, how far they had to travel and, like, stuff like that. Like, very J.R.R. Tolkien, like, nerd out about this fantasy world type of stuff.
I love maps. But I do have to say that the better they are a representation of geographic experience in a book, the less helpful they are to me, is, I think, my experience. Okay. Like, I read, you know, like, I've definitely used Tolkien's books less than Tolkien's maps in his books less than Paulina's map in his. But I've used anything that has it all just, like, right next to each other and funny little pictures and names, and that's it for things. Sure. I reference those all the time while reading.
What do you I want to go back in time, and this is kind of a new thing that we've been doing with some of these older things that we're reviewing, and put yourself back into when you read this book. And while you're remembering that, I think I said this during the last episode that we did on this series, but my first time touching Eldest was in a car on the way to scout camp, and it was just playing in the car. It had already come out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I the second I got home, we immediately bought this book from that scout camp after reading all of Aragon at scout camp.
Yeah.
What about you?
I don't have as visceral of memories about it as you do. Lots of my childhood feels like a wash to me, and I read a lot of books and have no idea how early I was reading them, because I was reading a lot of them very early and reread them over and over again is the reason that makes it feel really distinct, and Eldest is definitely no exception. I'd place myself 7th, 6th grade, somewhere in there, probably a year or two after it came out, and I probably read it straight through right after finishing Aragon, because I probably found them at roughly the same time in my... I think this is one that was put onto my radar by my parents.
Yeah, that's what you had said before.
Yeah, I think that my dad, who, you know, does a reasonable amount of fantasy reading and did more when he was younger, had picked up Aragon and Eldest, read them both and liked them, I think is how it came to me.
Do you guys have similar enjoyments in types of fantasy novels? Like,
I mean, definitely everything I ever started reading in science fiction
mm-hmm.
came through his library.
Okay. Cool.
And I think fantasy, obviously Tolkien, right? I think my dad straight up gave me the triple book box of Lord of the Rings to me at some point. But also, mostly couldn't keep up with the rate at which I was reading new fantasy stuff as a kid.
Awesome. I remember specifically my first impression of this book. I think we said this off the air, but this was actually, as far as I remember, the first book that had multiple POV characters for me.
Interesting.
And it was different, like, because I know that you said that you did the same thing. Like, I found myself like skipping to the other side of the other person's POV sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I can't possibly care about what's happening here for a second. And maybe that's like my ADHD brain or whatever, but it certainly was a different experience than something like, a lot of my reading. I read a lot as a kid, but I don't know that. I don't know. I don't know that I ever connected with a character the way that I connect with Aragon specifically. Like, I was also young when I was reading this book. I also didn't know. I had a hard time with the structures and beliefs of things around me and constantly asked questions. And I just remember relating to Aragon in this book specifically quite a bit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What about you? Do you remember any takeaways from your first read?
Oh, I mean, definitely. And I don't think it was my first read, but it was more on like early rereads of the book. I kept pretty exclusively to Aragon's track. And I think it's because at that time I was there for like the lore, the magic, the secrets. Like, I could not have cared less at the time at the village for the fate of the village of Carvajal, right? Like, I was skimming over the constant and awesome dangers that they're facing the whole time, right? Like, I think is essential is that it's actually far more interesting than I was giving it credit for as a kid. And I was like skipping just past that because I wanted to know like the next scene of one-on-one tutoring, right? Like, because that was so interesting every time.
Yeah, I had a different experience where, like, when it went to Roarin, I was very invested in Roarin's story quite immediately.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what place I got to that I was like, okay, I got to stop doing this, and like went back and finished up on Aragon stuff.
But it's a fantastic book. And I've read it now many times, right? Because I read it in anticipation, probably a couple of times in anticipation of Bersinger, and I definitely read it in anticipation of Inheritance.
Oh man, I also forgot
the whole series again since, I'm sure.
I forgot that they also, if you had a first edition, they might still do this in the next few editions still, but they would actually put a chapter from the next book in the back of the book, and the one, pull it out. But that I remember being like,
this one does not, but I'm certain my Aragon does.
So the one that was in the back of my copy of Eldest, the first copy that I had, was when he is alone in the Razak den. So
yeah,
it was pretty sweet. Let's go to overall impressions, and I'm gonna let you go first on this one. You've talked about how it was a great book, but is there any like big overall impressions or high level things that you thought about this book or think about it now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it explores. It gets to be more restful than Aragon was. Even Roarings part of the journey, which I think is most of the action page to page of the book, right? Like, if you'll recall in Aragon, it's like every 2 chapters is the pattern of we go to a new place, we start fighting things in the new place, right? Like, that's just what's happening throughout Aragon, and that's very different in this book for Aragon. He's now found where he's quote unquote supposed to be. He has to decide, is he going to go become like, is he going to he makes a lot of obligations in the beginning of this book, is I think the real clear thing happening. His double swearing of fealty at the beginning of this book impacts most of his choices for the rest of the book. And I think that like is an interesting place to kind of start Aragon off talking about him, is like he is way over his head, but in a new way, in a static way.
He is a curious people pleaser, and it can get him into trouble sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that as I think about this book now, and you know, obviously there were really cool parts when I was a kid, right? Just getting to explore Dweldenvarden, getting to, I mean, I just remember reading the chapter of the whirlpool and just being like, what is happening? Like, this is like the coolest book I've ever read. Like, there were so many really cool parts, but as I get older and I read this book, I still relate to Aragon the most. I still relate to this person who doesn't really, like, you're getting thrown into this new world and you're questioning everything you were taught when you were a kid, everything that you're being taught now, and it's really interesting to kind of see how he decides, like, does he want to eat meat? Does he want to, like, does he believe in any of the gods? Does he, does he really believe in himself enough to put himself through the pain? To, like, is there even a reason to do it? He actually has, like, existential crisis of, like, is this even, like, what is even the point in me doing this?
Yeah.
And I think that I'm going to say something that will shock listeners, but Ormus is, like, a substantially better teacher than Yoda or Obi-Wan or Brahm, or like Ormus is out of this world. Just this true masterclass teacher of just actually caring. There was a moment when I was listening to the audiobook last night where Aragon tells him that he has had a seizure, and he just simply says, "You have my sympathy." And I think about today, what the amount of hoops that we try to jump through to convince people that we care about them. And because they're speaking in the ancient language, Aragon just knows that he does in fact have his sympathy. And I wished in that moment I was like, man, I need to develop my friendships in a way that they just know that. Like, when I say, like, hey, I care about you, like, how are things going? Or, hey, like, I was thinking about you today. Go ahead.
I think the other thing that comes up there is it's an acceptance of it in a way that's very different than how I think
absolutely. It goes both
things,
ways.
Right? Like, just saying, like, oh, I had this situation that I can't do anything about, you can't do anything about, that hurts, right? And that's something that is felt deeply and not just like empathized, right? Sympathized, because has it as well, right? And it's just, and has similar conditions. But like, ultimately, it doesn't ask what can be done about it. It doesn't
No,
It doesn't
and
chide. It doesn't demean. It doesn't diminish. It's just like straight up like, that's rough, buddy.
yeah, it is.
Which is, I think, also a really good way to express it, if you ask me.
I just think that it is what Ormus teaches me, even as an adult, like, it is to, I don't know, just be open and honest, and like there's like the moments where he has, we'll get into I'm getting like way too into the weeds here, but my overall impression of this book was just learning opportunities for every character. You have Nasawada's moment where she's not taking care of herself at all. Like, her mental health is dwindling, and she has to be taught. Like, you have to be willing to enjoy some of your time. You've got.
This is actually the first time we've mentioned that Nasuada is a
POV character.
Yeah, as a POV character of this book, and her viewpoint is, I think, an essential one.
Stressful. It's so stressful.
But it's also an information laden set of chapters, right? Like, there is no way to more concisely write what is going on in the Varden than it is to view it through Nasuada's eyes, because she has to move on very quickly.
Yeah.
But also, like, this just marks where in the series we start seeing her point of view, and her point of view is essential for the rest of the series.
Oh, absolutely. It really, and I think that if she wasn't one of your, I mean, her part was so small in the first book, and still
impactful. Like, I think of her relationship with Murtaugh that they developed just in that, like, one chapter where it gets talked about, where I think it's still a really good bit of writing, like one of the better bits of writing of that first book.
Yeah, and then she also emphasizes lessons learned later for Aragon, and I'll get into that when we get into favorite parts of the book. And then you even have Roran, who needs to learn. Roran learns a lot. Roran is an interesting character. And just, this didn't happen, and if you haven't read the books, I'm sorry, spoiler. Like, I think we kind of have already crossed that bridge on this episode, but, I think that one of the greatest things about Roran's journey through this book is that Roran represents somebody so different from me, but I really understand Roran. Like, he is stubborn, but he cares a lot. One of the things that happened on Twitter,
his motivations, and his approach to fulfilling those motivations are utterly simplistic in a sense, right? But they're so powerful and they're so deserving.
I got into a Twitter debate 2 weeks ago whether or not Roaring could wield Mjolnir. And Twitter seems to think he could. I do not think he could. I do not believe that his motivations are pure of heart. I believe he's pretty selfish at times.
Yes, I would agree that I wouldn't even say is selfish. Is that even when what he is doing is for the good of everyone, right? The meaningful outcome of it. He has only one reason for it, and it's located exactly in whom and where he loves. Which is admirable, in a sense. Not great for certain types of self-sacrifice.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm just saying it was a fun debate, and I wanted to bring it up during the.
Sure.
I mean, we don't have to have the debate.
Okay.
But if you want to in the comments, you are more than welcome to if you're watching on YouTube. Let's move on to. So I wanted to do favorite POV character and then favorite side character, but I don't want to limit you to one side character. Do you want to do 2 or 3 side characters?
I think that we'll talk about the side characters we want to talk about. Is my guess is how this is going to go.
Okay. I will go first. And my answer changed throughout the years, but my favorite POV character was Aragon in this book. I think that that Christopher does a really good job of writing this, how old is he now? 16, 17 years old at this point in the book. I think he's almost 17. He might be 17. Like this 17-year-old kid that is like, just, he wants to please people. He's got these legends he has to live up to. And he just feels broken and lost. And even in those moments where he has Ormus to teach him, or even after that, like, he still is this flawed individual that is just wants to do the right thing and like help. You know, when I was little, one of my favorite lines when I first read Aragon, I really liked the snappy one-liners. But as I read this one, I like the more, I don't know, I like the more drawn out, thoughtful approaches to things. So my favorite POV character is Aragon, with Natsuwata being a close second. I really loved her chapters.
This read through, Spencer, it was roaring.
Okay, that was what I would have said when I was younger. So.
No, I realize, and I think maybe that's part of it is the embracing, enjoying what I kind of skipped over in the past, or maybe wasn't even ready to truly comprehend. But like the character that I find the easiest to identify with in this book is Roarin, after a fashion, as like an adult now. An adult without infinite responsibilities.
He's like a person that has to do this next thing, and he's like, "Okay, what do I have to do to get this thing done?" Right?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's an exploration of morality. It's an exploration of what we'll do to defend our family, of whom we're willing to work with in order to make things going. How to like, I mean, Roarin is like able to work with and synergize with people who want him dead in this book in like really meaningful ways, right? Like I think that his relationship with Bridget and her accounting for the loss of her husband is really interesting.
So for those who don't know, when this book was written, Roarin was supposed to become the king. So like the original plan for Roarin when this book was written is he would be the king of all of Alagazi at the end. So
I like how it was written better.
I mean, obviously so does Christopher. I think that one of the coolest parts about Roarin. Well, actually, I have a question for you because you said he was your favorite. What is Roaring's alignment in this book?
I would say chaotic for sure. His in the sense of what like currently he has a paradigm, right? Like there is like some immutable rules about the world that live far above him, right? Like I love Katrina. Aragon is like a brother to me. Carvajal is home. I will get revenge, right? Like those are I will get revenge for my father are kind of like rules for how he behaves that he's never gotten rid of. But I would say his actions, and like potentially that's a way to think about lawful, but I think that his actions are in the pursuit of those things are so chaotic and so like single-minded that like I think that he's basically got blinders on after a fashion because he's not looking around for a bigger picture. He's trying to achieve his objective.
So is he chaotic good? Is he chaotic neutral?
I think it's chaotic good because good allows for killing and for defense of self and for even drastic measures if it's for the cause that you believe is just in a true sense. Like it's for the greater community. It's for the right. Like his behavior as it is to the community of Carvajal is super impactful.
Yeah.
And it's just a pure tribalism of the moment almost, where it's like anyone outside of this group is bad everyone inside of this group must be kept alive at any cost.
I'm really glad I asked you that question. I think that you did a really good job of explaining Roaring in this book because of it. So,
yeah.
My favorite side characters. Number 1 is pretty easily Ormus. I think that. What a sad story. There's a lot of.
Yeah, I think that the book understates how damaged Ormus is.
Yeah, I think it does it on purpose, right? I think that's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the one where we see how old Yoda really is, or how right,
how
totally.
damaged. Yeah, I think about in a lot of ways, if you're a fan of the KOTOR series, in the second KOTOR, for those who don't know, KOTOR 2 is about one of the Jedi that.
That's me. I don't know.
That's okay. It's no spoilers here. This is one of the story of KOTOR 2 follows a Jedi who is actually the only Jedi to have left Revan's army, came back to face the Jedi Council for punishment for disobeying them.
Okay.
And you actually get to see the Jedi trial of this Jedi. And what I would give to be in the room when Ormus and the others deny Galbatorix the dragon and hear the conversations that they had afterwards as this clearly mad being leaves.
Yeah.
And just how seriously did they take this threat of this?
They didn't take either the threat or the need seriously.
Yeah, they didn't. And and he is Ormus, the character, is a tragedy. And in a lot of ways, whether you want to hearken Ormus to his Star Wars counterpart, which is Yoda, or not, they both failed. They both they messed
hold
up
it heavily that way.
They do, and they're upset with themselves more than anything else. But I think something that I like, don't get me wrong, I love Yoda, but Ormus has this true love and caring that is always coming out of him. Whether it's for Saphira, one of the things that I love so much about my wife being a kindergarten teacher, or just being a teacher in general, and one of the things I love about you, West, is there, in my opinion, is so little that we can do to show our love to others than to teach them about our mistakes, make sure that they know that we're not perfect, but help them be better and teach them.
Totally.
And Ormus does not shy away from his mistakes, but he also is not going to put up with kind of whiny BS from a teenager. And it's this.
Yeah, I really appreciate that Ormus is absolutely not misevaluating either the urgency of the situation or where Aragon is at through it all, right? I think that it's fascinating how much pressure, right, he would and should and does feel to teach Aragon the right things, to make sure that Aragon is a success. But I think that even despite that, he still goes process first, knowing that a good process will get good results instead of worrying about those good results at any point. And I think that's also extremely beautiful considering how much pressure there is there.
Yeah. I will get into favorite parts about him later, but or favorite moments. My other favorite side character, I don't have a lot to say, but every time I read the book, I don't like this character, and I really like that it's done so well. But Queen as Lanzati is my skin crawls. I'm you're terrible. You're so terrible. Extremely manipulative, extremely I don't know how you and I think Arya understands this really well. Where like she can see how disingenuous she's being. Like her mother really has perfected this art of speaking in only truths, but making sure that they're only hurting Arya. And it is like this I don't know, this I really appreciate the writing, and I'm glad that that we got an example of what they were talking about in the book, as far as like the elves being able to speak without
Sure.
giving everything away, and
I think it's like genuinely hard to like remember when the ancient language is being spoken, right? That nobody is lying and cannot lie in this situation, right? But that there are stakes in how that happens. Like I think it's something that totally is easy to like gloss over because of course it's not in a different language, right? Like it's still English right in front of you, and if you're not tracking the language shifts in the narration, right, when it says what language they're talking in, like it's interesting. I like it. It's a lot of fun to consider.
Yeah. What about you? Any side characters that you really enjoyed?
I like Glader. He's so cool. I think that just like the old dragons, I think are just a viewpoint that are super cool to explore, right? And we can only really begin to see it here. But the thought of a being capable of that depth for that long is, and it still be like about hunt, right? Like is so cool. I just enjoy reading the way he phrases things and the way that he shows his warmth as a teacher in very different ways than the gentleness of Aromas.
Yeah, they do a good cop, bad cop. But it like
I think all the dragons are the bad cops of their writers for the most part.
I mean, also, yeah,
maybe Thorn might be the good cop. That
could be true. It's funny because you think about some of the moments that like Glader, Ormus doesn't put up with stuff, but Glader is like, no, like, no. And I appreciate that. I think that even in the later books, you kind of see that from him, where he just is like so no nonsense, and you know that could be an age thing, or it could just be like his temperament is just different. Like, and it's funny when you kind of compare the dragons. We only get four of the dragons really in this, or I guess. Yeah, 4 of the dragons really in the series.
Overall, but, we do not get into the heads and minds of many dragons.
Yeah, and like, I think that he's so different from Saphira. I guess technically, once you get to never mind. We're gonna go way.
I laid that one for you.
Yeah, I know. I think that he's so different from Saphira and is such a sharp contrast to her. Where like. It's hard to remember sometimes. The Saphira's like 2 years old at this point.
Yeah. Well, and isn't also.
And right, because she actually has the memories from when she was an egg and like the instincts of generation. It's very interesting. Yeah, Glader is a good one. I thought for sure you were going to say Angela in this book, for what it's worth.
She's a great book. In general, I think that she's a critical aspect of what's amusing in all of Nasuada's POV for this book.
Yeah.
I think, though, that my heart is in a lot of ways captured by the elves. I do think that this is Jode's book, though, if he's going to have a book. And that might be my favorite thing, is that like he brings a new sort of like life to Roarin's single-minded rampage down the coastline, and I mean, of course, doesn't really restrict it either, but brings a different point of view to it, and does a good job of like starting to onboard Roarin to the whole situation. Does a good job of committing, I think, to for the first real time, I think is a big part of it. I don't know. He's a cool character that you're with for 2 chapters in the first book, and you get a lot more of him in this book.
I have a favorite. If we're ready to move on to favorite moments, one of the moments in the book is a Jode moment for me. Which is they're literally sitting in his office drinking brandy. And he's got a knife to his neck, and he tells his wife to shut up. And then he says to Roaring, if I can't convince you, you might as well kill me, because it'll be way better than telling my wife why I yelled at her for no reason.
Yeah.
It's just, like, I don't know. It's also just how I imagine the character, where he's just so, like, he's done his adventures. He's way more interested in history and, like, you know.
Yeah. Ideally, he just wants to be alone with new books.
Right, exactly. So he's just like, you know what? Maybe it's time. I don't know. I really loved that moment. Like,
also,
he's so excitable, like, as well, and I love that.
And I would say that he is someone who has this really interesting relationship with his wife, because his, like, motivations are so on a different level than what benefits him and home, but yet he super feels the need to be giving her what she deserves.
Yeah. I'll go to my next favorite moment. It's kind of a 2-for-1, so maybe I'll just leave it at this one, but I'm actually going to read a quote from the book. And this is, Aragon says, it's different. Urgles deserve to be wiped out, every last one of them. Even their families and their children, the ones who haven't harmed and you or likely never will, the innocents. Would you kill them all and condemn an entire race to the void? They wouldn't spare us given the chance. Aragon, Ormus explained in a biting tone, I never want to hear you use that excuse again. That because somebody else has done or would do something means that you should too. It's lazy, repugnant, and indicative of an inferior mind. Am I clear? And it's funny, because you could try to simplify this down to the golden rule or whatever, but that's not actually what Ormus is saying.
Yeah.
He is saying that there's no reason. It's not that you should do something good to somebody else because you want them to do it to you. It's there's no reason to do the bad thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think even more importantly, the corollary is you should always have a good reason for the choice you're making right now. And that other people are doing it is not enough to justify that it is the right choice.
Right. And
that I think is a really good, important part of it as well, and actually is a magic idea as well that I think I've baked in from game playing in a lot of ways, which is right, like that my choices should have some strategy to them, and I should be able to explain that.
Yeah, and this is coming from a time too where he's trying to teach him logic. Yeah. And he's trying to show him that these emotional answers don't actually, like, just take a step back, Aragon. And Aragon doesn't learn this lesson. And it takes Aragon all the way to when he's going inside the mind of oh my gosh, I can't remember his name.
Going inside the mind of
the Urgle chieftain that Nasawada sets to protect him.
Oh, his name is good too.
Narsvarg.
Yeah, Varzog?
Yeah, something like Vargal.
I'm finding it.
Okay.
We'll just keep saying it.
Either way, the thing is like, even at that point, he still hasn't gotten it. Saphir is yelling at him, Nasawada is yelling at him, and he's still not getting it. And it's like, it's this thing that we all have to do, right? We all have to check our biases at the door and really question our beliefs in order to move forward as people. And I really loved that lesson in this book. And, you know, Aragon continues to learn it through the series, but I really appreciated that. And that quote from Ormus, where he's just like, it's one of those moments where it's a loving, like, he's laying down the law. He's like, dude, you sound like an idiot. Like, you sound stupid when you say that. And, you know, Aragon has to, like, he just literally was told that what he just said is repugnant and of somebody with a lazy mind by probably the person that he respects most in the entire world right now. And it's
certainly the person who he has to learn the most from in the entire world right now.
Yeah, so it's a lot to digest. So that's my favorite moment in the whole book, and
that's a really good one.
So, what about you?
I think that the whole elf time for Aragon in Duveld and Varden is is just nonstop like candy for me, the fantasy reader who loves learning more about like the magic of a world. And I think that no chapter is like better than that than the scene of the Ageti Blodrin, the Blood Oath celebration. I think is just like so bizarre and interesting and questioning, right? Like I think that we're given two powerful moments of something beyond an understandable magical force in this book, in the summoning of Guntera and the and this moment where the soul of dragons is summoned, basically. And I think that's a really cool scene as well. I think the healing of Aragon's impactful, the way it's done, the lack of good answering for it at the time is really good. I don't know. And like I just love Saphira's hot licked metal, right? Like I think there's a lot of things that are really cool.
There's a lot of really cool parts to that. You did remind me of one of my other favorite moments, and it could be one of maybe selfishness, but I really liked. Is it? What is the name of the elf? It starts with a V.
Well, they're dual.
Well, no, not even their. Well, not their duel. I actually really like when he tries to pull the sword out and can't do it because Aragon's gotten so strong.
Mm.
I really appreciate the, I don't know, just him getting his comeuppance in a lot of ways. Because he has his moments, right, where like he teaches Aragon that Aragon has not a clear understanding of how magic works. That to where the point where Aragon has to learn something. But Aragon teaches him in a lot of ways that like he also, just like Aragon is being a racist towards Orgulls, is equally being a racist towards humans.
Sure.
And, you know, shows him up in front of all of his friends. And I don't know. I really like that moment where like he's like kind of in shock. So.
Yeah. I mean, those scenes are interesting, right? That's Aragon's like biggest place of failure almost while he's in Duveld and Varden is his inability to best elves for a while. And that's a meaningful moment. Oh, my favorite scenes of this book, my favorite moments that happen here. I mean, I will say the moment Murtagh reveals himself, that whole scene hits, right? Like it was shocking to read then and it's shocking to read now. It's a totally different character than you last experienced him. Just a big surprise and with an astounding revelation as well, I think is also impactful.
I remember finishing this book and just being like, what just happened? Obviously, it's why I think this book draws the comparisons to Empire so much, but there was so much, like, the fact that Aragon recognized who it was immediately just from how he, like, you know, his little sword flick, and just was furious, just, like, so mad. And, I don't know, it really, while, you know, they want to call it 700 pages of drag, it really pulls you into, like, what Christopher is saying and what he's teaching. Teaching, like,
500 of those pages are to make you forget that Murtagh's gone. So you can be got.
We skipped favorite storyline. My favorite moments kind of made up mine, but when I was thinking of this, it was like I think yours is Aragon in Eldest.
Oh no, actually, this time it was everyone's settling into war that was happening here, building a war machine, adjusting their lives to war. I think that resolve, right? That constant asking, are we doing the right thing? Is this what we should be doing? Is it enough? Oh, we're doing it. We're going. We're getting there. We've gotten better for this, right? I think that like the choice that Nasuwata makes to have like the magic users of the Varden make lace is
that's
awesome.
my favorite. That's my favorite storyline in the whole book is how the Varden gets funded.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool place to have it as well. Really, just every single time Nasuwata like, and she gets to be the cleverest, right? Like every scene, she is somehow like making everyone else look bad, and that they didn't. They totally underestimated her.
Yeah. Let's move on to Could Be Betters. I have a couple. My first Could Be Better for this book is I think that there's not a clear understanding. Maybe there's not a clear. So I don't like power creeps in a lot of ways, but like there's not a clear level in my head of like what a dragon gives to its rider, what an elf has that a human doesn't have, what like a really good example of this is like if the Razak are so powerful, like how in the world are they not just tearing through this village?
Mm-hmm.
And like I think there's just inconsistencies, and that's fine. Like I'm not here to like nitpick. It's just pretty inconsistent throughout the series.
Yeah, I mean, it's not worth counting the number of times Roran probably should have died before the end of the series, right? Like, that guy is able to get away with things.
And then outside of those like power inconsistencies, I would say that my other biggest Could Be Better is I don't like. I don't know if it was editing, but like there's some moments that like feel like they were squished where others are really elongated. And I didn't like some of those pacing decisions. So like a really good example of this is like, all right, we got past this eye. Now we're in the city. Also, we're not in the city. We're traveling, and like skipping over all of that. Like it almost feels like multiple chapters were cut of Roarings to get him to the point where he's there. Another example of this is like I feel like it feels like setting up the Burning Plains and like either travel to Serta was cut or travel to the Burning Plains was cut for Nasuwata. Which like there are a few moments that I think about that.
I mean, I think that there are overall this book's timeline gets to be a mess because one of the things starts during the same time as the second third of the last book.
Is that when that starts?
Oh yeah, like Roran. Like,
I didn't know that.
We get the account of what happens minute by minute from when Aragon leaves, basically.
Oh, I've read this book probably over 40 times and never realized that.
Right, like we are doing books worth of time for Roran in one book.
Got it. Okay. Those are my Could Be Betters though. There were some like pacing issues. The pacing issues make a little more sense now in some ways. But yeah, I think those are my only two. I used to have a problem with how they made King Orin really likable in this book because of later stuff, but I actually think that's good. So.
Well, I thought that was supposed to be a trend that you noticed as you read.
Yeah. What about you? Any specific Could Be Betters?
This is the book that like delivers my expectations of this series the best. If that makes sense. Like I there is nothing that happens in this book that doesn't need. I mean, there are some things that maybe didn't need to happen, but really, I value all of the information, and I like where it starts, and I like where it ends, and I think that it doesn't need to go farther or in a different way, right? Like the devastating defeat of sorts at the end, right? But and the loss of property, I guess is how we can phrase a sword. I don't know, like it's a really tight book. It has, like you've pointed out, right, some excellent like moral discussions, and reflects I think writing Ormus to have him make as much sense as he does requires a very high level of philosophy knowledge at this age that Paolini was writing this. Which is awesome. It was a good book.
So no could be betters from West.
I mean, I'll give it. There are some awkwards.
Yeah, he still has some one-liners in here.
But I don't think it's not like could be betters. It's like, or just like the whole trying to figure out what's going on with Arya line, right, is very awkward, but partly because it's supposed to be awkward. Right?
I really like the awkwardness.
No, that part I like about it.
Yeah.
More of just when and how he chooses his moments are awkward in terms of the pacing and stuff.
I've kind of gone over so many love-its. I'm wondering if I missed any big ones. I think that you really feel... I didn't mention this, but you mentioned it, but just I really love how you can feel how much Roaring loves this girl. I really like that. I
can feel it more in book 3.
Yeah, you do.
Which I will say.
I really love Saphira's openness, and I feel like Saphira gets opened up a lot in this book. Yeah. Those are kind of probably the ones that haven't been mentioned. Any last ones that you want to throw out there before we rate this thing?
Is the Trial of Long Knives in this?
No, it's in the next one.
No, it isn't. Okay. I mean, it's a fantastic book. Yeah. I think that there are many great moments, right? It's just constant. I will say, I think that one thing we didn't mention at all is the first third of the book's explanation of Dwarven history and culture is kind of fun.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of that.
I liked that a lot. I really liked Arya's disdain as well. Like, I loved the whole thing. Kind of the whole interaction. Also, setting up some villainy from some of the dwarves. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go first on the rating. I'm gonna give it a 5. This book is the best in the series by a lot. And also just I can never remember reading a book, finishing it, and then just being like, I cannot wait for the next one. Like, even Harry Potter 4, 5, and 6 didn't do this for me like this. Like, I put down Eldest and was like, when does it come out? Like, how long do I have to wait? It was supposed to be a bridge book too. Like, there was only supposed to be one more book. And I just couldn't comprehend how it could possibly finish in one book.
Oh yeah,
Fun fact: it
definitely. That is clear, right? Going into Bersinger, we're probably both going to talk about this, right? This is one of the first books we actively anticipated getting our hands on, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that the Harry Potter doesn't count so much because it was like a group fever activity.
Yeah.
Right? It was like so widespread. It wasn't like, I want this book the moment it comes out. It's everybody wants this book the moment it comes out. And like that, like the taste in, like, we took a long time savoring Eldest as kids, I think. And that really meant a lot.
What about you? 0 to 5. 700 Paids of Drag gets
4.5.
Okay.
The one correct comment that's kind of a ding. No, I hesitate on 5 this one, and I don't think it's Eldest's fault. I think it's that I have dreams of what I think of as 5
Sure.
5s in literature, and I've definitely read a few.
Sure.
And they are on a different level than Eldest for me, I think. But Eldest is
It's pretty good YA, man.
The YA I want to reread the most, like at this moment, and I imagine there's just not that much YA I crave to reread,
right,
anymore at all. And this series is still one of them.
Yeah. You can find me at Spencer13H. You can find the podcast at Nature Nerd Pod. We're, like I said, series of Heezy plays games this year. It won't all be Valheim, but we're starting with Valheim. Yeah, that's kind of where you can find me. You can also find me on the Constructive Criticism podcast, a weekly podcast about improving at Magic the Gathering. What about you, West?
You can find me on Twitter at East_monotone. You can find me on Instagram, I think, at the same one, in which I realized today, Spencer, that I haven't changed my bio on Instagram since the summer of 2020. Because I discovered I just had links to Black Lives Matter stuff of a very targeted moment on my Instagram bio, and I hadn't changed it at all in a very long time, which was fascinating.
Like the podcast, smash that subscribe button, and review it wherever you can. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening, and we will see you guys all next time on another episode of Need to Nerd.
Is Saphira just like a big blue Charizard?
I think she's a big blue cat. Specifically, she's a cat.
That's true. The feline aspect of dragons comes through
straight
clearly.
She's straight up a cat. And it's funny, too, because she is also like a kitten cat, and Glader is clearly like a grumpy old cat, and you really get that sense.